any of these moments. I quit. I don't want to do this anymore.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another shared news update. Today we are talking all about Rachel as the Bachelorette. But of course, before we get into that discussion, make sure you hit the subscribe button and ring that bell so you never miss any of our Bachelor Nation updates. Now, a lot of Bachelor Nation is kind of thinking the same thing right now, okay? Rachel is crying a little too much and being a little bit of a drama queen, okay? So we're gonna break down kind of what's going on here. Is it Rachel? Is it the format? Is it the producers? What's happening? Of course, I have got my girl gang with me, Morgan Wright and Allison Van Dam. We are gonna be breaking it all down. How are you, ladies?
I'm great. I'm ready to get into it. What about you, Allison?
Same. It's always a good day when we can break down a little Bachelor Nation while we're waiting on the next episode. So let's just dive right in.
On that note, then let's do it. So let's start off with like what some people are saying online, right? So one fan had tweeted, quote, Rachel is literally just torturing herself. She needs to stop comparing herself with Gabby. Another one said, quote, might be an unpopular opinion, but Rachel is not a good Bachelorette, at least from what we've seen. If she was by herself, I don't think I would have watched. I think that's a little bit ruthless, but there's a lot of tweets out there saying something similar, right? So let's talk about the format of the show, because I'm questioning if we as Bachelor Nation, as fans, would really be having this perception of Rachel if there wasn't a second lead, right? Because we wouldn't be having anybody to compare her to. So because of the way the show is formatted, of course, with two leads, do you guys think that we are just naturally led to now make comparisons between the two people and kind of choose someone that we like over the other?
Yeah, I mean, just putting yourself in Rachel's shoes for 1 second, I feel like it all kind of hit the fan during that rose ceremony. You know, when publicly Rachel had 3 of her roses declined. And, you know, as a viewer at home, she was getting very upset, which of course anybody would get upset in that situation when you're feeling rejected on national television. But, you know, I'm sitting at home thinking, but Rachel, you didn't see the fact that last episode, 3 guys said the same thing to Gabby about, you know, having a better connection with Rachel. So I feel like definitely there's some producer manipulation. There's some things that the lead don't see that we see. And I feel like Rachel might just be focusing too much on the rejection instead of focusing on the things that are going really well for her.
Yeah, I agree. It's just a tricky spot for her to be in. And I think she inherently is going to compare herself to Gabby, compare their experiences, compare, well, you know, Gabby's men are professing their love to her and my men won't even look at me. But I think from an audience perspective, you know, obviously with having 2 bachelorettes, yeah, we're going to discuss, you know, who we resonate more with, you know, whose guys we would more likely pick. But even if it was just Gabby or Rachel, I think we would still be comparing them to every other lead that's come before them. You know, if it was just Rachel, would we be talking about how she handled situations versus how Katie did or how Hannah Brown did? You know, Hannah Brown was a very emotional bachelorette as well. So would we be drawing those comparisons as opposed to comparing her to people who are very different? You know, Gabby is more of the, let's say, Caitlin Bristow type of bachelorette. Maybe Rachel resonates with someone more like Hannah Brown. Like there are just so many different personalities that we've seen be picked as leads. So I think it's impossible to compare 2 very different women in their journeys to find love.
Yeah, I think you're totally correct. And Morgan, I think you made like a really good point too. Like so much of what it feels like Rachel is doing is focusing on that rejection or on what's not going right. I mean, think about her Paris date with Tino, right? Like that was such an amazing, beautiful, great date. And then we have 2 seconds later, she's crying because she's feeling like, you know, nobody cares about her. I just don't understand how she has so many mood swings. Like, why is she not seeing that? Or is it producers getting in her head about, you know, like the whole Gabby date situation?
I think it might also be a little bit of the title, The Bachelorette. You know, we've seen it with Gabby, we've seen it with Rachel, we've seen it with Katie even saying like, I don't feel like I'm a good bachelorette. Like I'm just a person. I want to be Rachel. I want to be Gabby. So I feel like, I mean, we all saw that date with Tino. She could very well pick him in the end. I mean, he's my final rose pick for her. The sparks were flying. Their chemistry was undeniable. He seems all in. So it's like, yes, you have that very high, and then you know, go to Gabby's date and maybe things didn't go the way you wanted them to. And then it brings her to this low. And it kind of makes me think, well, is she just assuming that that's how she's supposed to feel being the bachelorette? Because if you know Tino's it and you're done and you're good and he's the one, like, are you really going to get that upset at Gabby's date? I don't know. So I think there is a lot of pressure when it comes to putting the term the bachelorette on a lead and then thinking they have to live up to a certain expectation.
But I think Morgan, also going along with that, when you bring the title of The Bachelorette and what the show is, even if she has an amazing date with Tino, even if she, really sees the potential, that's still scary. And like she even said on their date, it's early. And I think part of the allure of being on a show like this is you are supposed to feel wanted by multiple men. You're supposed to, end up with a
Yes.
choice. Like you should be able to choose between countless men. She already went through the heartbreak of, Clayton's season. This was kind of supposed to be a reward at the end of the day to make it all worth it. And she's supposed to have, it's supposed to be her choice. So similarly to what we watched on Clayton's season when she was saying, well, this is not how it's supposed to work. I'm not supposed to just be the last one standing. I think maybe that is playing into the fact that she doesn't want Tino to just be the one guy who's actually prioritizing her. She should have the right to go on dates and really be torn and really feel like she's making the right decision. Because I think if there's just one, it's kind of like, okay, well, how do I really actually know if this is the person for me?
Yeah. I think that you're so right. Cause I always thought like, yeah, I would love to be the bachelorette. I want 30 men like pining after me. Like, like how good would that feel? Even though like that's totally not real life, but like it's part of like the nice thing about being the lead. So continuing on then, obviously, there was another thing also that I saw that really I thought played into what happened at Gabby's date as well. Somebody had written like, it wasn't Rachel who made Gabby's date about her. It was the producers and how they edited it, which I think is like, I feel like Rachel is getting a bit of an unfair edit to a degree because it was made to seem like Rachel made this whole date all about Gabby, which I'm sure in the moment Gabby didn't feel that whatsoever because the conversations weren't actually at all between the two of them. It was just Rachel and it was just the producers in her confessionals. So Allison, do you think that like the reason why it seemed like Gabby's date was all made about Rachel was because of the producers, or it's kind of like 50-50 between the two?
Yeah, I mean, obviously producers have a way of manipulating and bringing out that emotion. It has to stem from some sort of emotion. We saw her on the date, making comments to Gabby of, oh, they're not even looking at me. Like even Tino in the background's just like jumping up and down. So I'm guessing producers and the camera crew overheard that. Obviously they filmed it. And then they get her in an ITM or like an in the moment interview and they can ask really powerful questions. I heard a friend of a friend who was on a very early season and maybe they are not this ruthless now, but this girlfriend of mine was saying that her girlfriend went on the show and when she was excused and put in the limo after a rose ceremony, there was a producer in the car saying, do you feel like this will mean you'll never find love or are you going to end up alone? Like they really just like ask these weighted questions. So if she was already having these doubts and then they're starting to ask her questions of, well, do you feel like anyone's actually here for you? Or how did it make you feel when Gabby's being, professed all of her love to and they're not even looking at you? It's their job to make TV. And again, I don't know if they are still that ruthless in 2022, but it's kind of can build on itself. And maybe she looks back and adds more anxiety to the situation. Or if they're feeding her stuff, maybe that's why she ended up getting so upset. Maybe that's why she ended up confronting the men because maybe in the moment it was just kind of a weird like data point or annoyance. But then when all you're doing while you're on these sets and while you're on this journey is ruminating about like these 5 minutes you have with the guys, you can turn it into all sorts of narratives.
Yeah, I mean, especially coming off of that horrible rose ceremony. She like just went through a very public rejection. She said she felt humiliated. And then to have that happen right after, I feel like it probably was just a bit of a snowball effect. One thing that
Yeah.
I feel like I wish both Rachel and Gabby would just kind of think about a little more is that these spur of the moment situations, like when Gabby shows up to the house and the guys are playing football, or Rachel shows up to Gabby's group date and then they bring the guys in. I wish that they would just consider the fact that it is kind of a random thing. You know, they're not at a cocktail party, they're not actually on a group date. So, do you pull the lead to like have a chat? Do you try to take them away from the group? Or do you just try to hang out like normal people? Like, I feel like a lot of times the guys are just trying not to be rude, you know, because at the house, when everybody's there, if one guy's like, hey, you want to go talk to me? If that were me in that situation, I would feel like I was being a rude person. So it's just the craziness that is The Bachelor. And they've said a million times, they're kind of making things up as they go along here. So I'm thinking that they're just reading a little bit too much into that.
Well, I was going to say, shouldn't they know? You know, they've been former contestants. So wouldn't they know some of the tactics by now? Like, I would think when you take over the lead role, you would understand, okay, you know, I've been through this. They ask these poignant questions and they've seen how it plays out because they've gotten, you know, the benefit, they've gotten the luck of watching the show once as a contestant, seeing how whatever they were asked was then portrayed. So now being the lead, I would feel like that would come into some consideration. Like, okay, these are the questions, like, and I understand it's different because you're also having different emotions and feelings. So it's hard to sometimes, you know, draw a parallel between the two. But even like the point you just brought up, Morgan, when, you know, Gabby walks in on the group and it's not normal and nothing's happening. I just have to assume that they've been told similar things when they were a contestant. So wouldn't they think that, are you following what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think an interesting point building off that, Blakely, is when Rachel, when she was so upset about this group date and talking about the guys and them not valuing her, she had a line in an interview that was something along the lines of, even Clayton made me feel more valued than they did when I was just a contestant and I wasn't even a lead. And I totally understand that, but you can also flip that on its head. And I think it gets confusing because, you know, there are these like heteronormative, you know, roles of like the guy should be pursuing the girl and whatever. And so I think that's what she's hoping that these guys are going to do, that they're going to take the initiative and go and sit down with her. But I think a factor that she was missing at that point is there's a power dynamic here. You know, Clayton was able to make you feel valued because he had the power to pull you aside, to make you feel that way. So she does have the right and the power to be pulling these men. If she really, I understand her desire to feel chased, to feel desired, but as the lead, it's kind of up to her to, if she wants to pull these guys, have these conversations, she still has the power. It's not just, you know, giving it over to the men. And if they don't want to talk to her, they don't have to. You know, she can say, hey, Tino, come sit with me. Or like, hey, like, let's talk about X, Y, and Z. She is the lead. And I wish sometimes she just like embodied that a little bit more.
Yeah, that is a really great perspective, actually. I feel like you need to be like the Bachelorette therapist while they're there. And it brings up also an interesting point, too, of the fact that, you know, a lot of women always want to be chased. But I feel like time and time again, at least especially on The Bachelor, we see women are much, I think probably in general, too, women are much more pursuers than men are. At least that's how I feel like has been in my life and what I've watched on The Bachelorette. When has a bachelor ever said, and obviously men deal with their emotions differently, but when has a bachelor ever said, you know, no one is pursuing me, no one came up to talk to me, no one tried to pull me, you know, versus we've seen that now with Rachel, we've seen that now with Gabby, we saw it with Claire. You know, so it's interesting because as much as women always want to be chased, for some reason we are also always the pursuers, or not always, but in a lot of instances. So there's probably a confusion there too with the men who don't have the power, but then they're expected to be pursuers. But, you know, I think it draws maybe like a gray area. Now, another thing that I think is also a really big component here is that The Bachelor really has been focusing a lot on Rachel. Morgan, I think you shared somebody's TikTok that I saw from Bachelor Data that really broke down like how much airtime Rachel has been getting compared to Gabby. And basically, so all 4 episodes, Rachel has gotten more airtime. Specifically, episode 2 in the last episode, she's had 10 to 11 minutes more airtime with Gabby, which really is a significant amount. And I just, you know, is it, first off, we have the Bachelorettes, right? We have 2 leads where they're supposed to be equal. I never even thought about screen time playing into this, but should this be divvied up more fairly? Do you guys think that this is having a effect on how the fans are perceiving the leads?
Yeah, I think producers are following the drama, you know, and right now Rachel is the one that is bringing the most drama to the show. I feel like they're also setting Rachel up. And I actually talked to Susanna from Bachelor Data about this specific point on my podcast this week, where they're setting her up for, a fairy tale ending. She's going through this really traumatic experience. She's not liking it. She's wanting to go home. She's crying every episode. They're getting us invested in her a lot more, right? Because her road might not be as straight and narrow as maybe Gabby's is. Because when you think about it right now, you look at Gabby's guys, there's really only two, maybe three really clear front runners. We have Eric, we have Jason, and Nate are all, really into her. But as far as Rachel's concerned, I mean, it's the point of this whole panel. We don't really know what's going on with her. So the fact that she's going through so much, we think that it's really just a setup to have fans be cheering her on even more at the end when she hopefully gets her happily ever after.
Yeah, I think Morgan's 100% right. It just comes down to what happens in that episode. They both have camera crews following them throughout all of their dates. But if you think about, the second episode where Rachel sent Jordan V home, that was unprecedented. That was the first one-on-one. He didn't get the rose. You're thinking about, this past episode where she confronts the guys about not feeling valued. It's just, she had bigger moments in each of those episodes. And do I think it should be close to 50-50? Sure. But at the end of the day, it's a TV show and it's a business. So I would rather feel like I got the complete Rachel story for a really dramatic moment than getting that smushed down so I can see, Gabby's continued conversation with Spencer. That really, it was fine, but it wasn't like gripping by any means.
But by the way, I do feel like Gabby has had moments that could feel bigger. She's talked about her mom multiple times where it's clearly an emotional conversation for her about feeling, unloved. And I feel like those are also really big and also valuable and important moments for the fans, for people in general, for Gabby, for her love journey. And so, but to me, it kind of feels like the producers and The Bachelor is valuing Rachel's drama in terms of, I think maybe because it's more focused on the guys and with Gabby versus what Gabby's is like more relatable and like real world issues, if that makes sense.
Yeah, in regards to Gabby, though, I've been seeing this a lot online that they don't necessarily like that they're using this insecurity that Gabby has, the way that she was brought up, the relationship that she has with her mother to kind of fuel drama. And it's really giving a flashback to Matt James' season where we had the moment where his dad came in, they talked on camera, and I thought that was way too far. I think a lot of Bachelor Nation felt that way. It just felt like a dirty line that didn't need to be crossed. So maybe they do want to address, the situation that Gabby has with her mom, the lack of the relationship, because it gives context to her story. But also maybe they've learned from their past mistakes that doing stuff like that can come across really dirty.
I think that actually is a great point, because I feel like it's always this push and pull with Bachelor Nation, right? I almost feel like there's never this happy medium, whereas you're either doing too little or you're doing too much. Because I actually think that it's a beautiful thing that they're showing the struggles that she did have with her mom, because there are many other people who are out there that can really relate to that and relate to that feeling of, am I difficult to love because my mom didn't love me the way that she should have? And how is this going to impact my future and people who, that I want to have a relationship with? So I think it is beautiful that they're showing that. But then again, here I am saying, well, it's not enough. But then there's probably other people who are saying, well, it would then be too much. So, you can never please everybody, I feel like, especially within Bachelor Nation. But I did see somewhere where Gabby had basically said that what is being shown on TV are obviously not the only things that are happening. Like, if those were the only things that were happening, which is this negative, then they would not have stayed. So I think that it's also, again, while Rachel is very sensitive and she's very emotional, and we love emotions in shared news, okay? Like, wear your heart on your sleeve, all good, but it's a lot. But I think, again, like, it's being portrayed in a more dramatic, and of course, like, we should expect that in a more dramatic way than it really is, because my question is, like, every episode we're seeing Rachel say, oh, this is like too much. I don't want to feel like I'm wanting to leave every single day or whatever. But I feel like it was important because Gabby had said that's not actually like our reality. There are a lot of happy, good moments that are happening that make us want to stay. If it was this bad that's being shown, we wouldn't be here any longer. So I guess final thoughts from you guys. Are we honing in too much on Rachel's sensitive emotions and the negative that's happening? Or like you said, Morgan, is it a good thing because it's now prepping her for her fairy tale ending?
Yeah, I think we're definitely going to see a turnaround for Rachel. I feel like every lead goes through somewhat of a breakdown, whether it be in the beginning of the season or the end. So maybe it's a good thing that Rachel is having hers early on in the season. That way, when she gets to her final four, she might not have, as hard of a time as some people have had in the past. I'm just going to put that positive vibe out there. And even if I don't really believe it, I'm just going to manifest that for Rachel.
Yeah, I think we're honing in on it a lot because of the fact that there's two leads. Again, it inherently leads to comparison, but I think even if we're
Hmm.
talking about Rachel's, drama queen moments, the tears, Gabby's had just as many. Gabby had the cocktail party, or I guess that group date at the football stadium where multiple men told her that they weren't there for her, and she channeled that more into frustration, not giving out a rose, leaving a bit early, just having more of a
Yeah.
clipped tone. We've also seen Gabby up and leave one-on-one dinner tables and cry about, being an imperfect bachelorette and people wanting someone like Rachel more than her. So I think they just process things differently. I think they show their emotion in different ways. I myself am a crier. My sister is completely not. So I'm like, put the two of us on a TV show and I'm going to look like the drama queen. But I think they're both just going through like a very stressful process. So we need to like give Rachel a little bit of grace.
Okay. Give her some grace, people. You heard it here first, but we do want to know, what do you guys think? Is it Rachel? Is it the producers? Is it a little bit of both? Is it the format? What do you think is happening right now for why a lot of people are leaning towards maybe Rachel being a bit of a drama queen? So drop all of your thoughts down in the comment section below. But before you do that, make sure you hit the subscribe button and ring that bell so you never miss any of our Bachelor updates. We are always having good chats here on Shared News. And of course, we want to hear what you have to say. I'm your host, Blakely McHugh, joined with Morgan Wright and Allison Van Dam. You can see our social media handles on the screen. Drop by, give us a follow, and say hello. And of course, we will see you next time.